Greetings and welcome to PinballHelp. Mike here. Although today this is probably another video in the Pinball Philosophy series where I kind of talk about just some of the philosophical aspects of pinball, operating pinball games, technology, etc. In this case, I'm going to talk about ghosts in the machine. And what I mean by that are just problems that happen in machines, and sometimes problems that end up being patterns of problems and how you deal with them. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I've been operating games, and recently I had a couple of machines that just continued to have problems. Even after I kept fixing them, I felt like I was doing whack-a-mole. And some people actually thought that I was like a bad operator because certain games just were always broken. But what was happening was I was fixing them, and then they were breaking again. And it got me to thinking about when you're putting games on location, it's a completely different dynamic than when you just kind of have them in your home. Although in your home, you can run into the same problem. You need a game that's really, really reliable. If it's not reliable, then it's going to be a problem. But when it's on location, it's even more of a problem because people will complain. It'll give the place a bad reputation and you won't make any money. So I've learned over the years that some games are more reliable than others. And this is absolutely a very significant and profound thing. Games are often rated on their, how their playability and their rule set and how cool the theme is, but they're not almost never rated on how reliable they are. And while some games can just be unreliable because of that particular example of the game, that may have been poorly put together in some way or might have been in a bad environment that degraded its quality or whatever. And some games are just inherently unreliable by design if they've got too many complicated mechanisms, or they have a mechanism that wasn't fully tested and doesn't really work right. It's not bulletproof. There's a bunch of different things. Of course, there's some architectures, like if you look here, this is a Stern thing, and then right next to it is Twilight Zone, which is a WPC, and then over here is a System 80, which is a Gottlieb. Now, these System 80 machines, they have a couple of fundamental design problems, and I'll flip it on, because when I turn this game on, sometimes the display works and sometimes it doesn't. It's working right now because it went out not long ago, and I had to remove the connectors and reseat them. It uses edge connectors instead of the pin connectors, and they're notoriously unreliable. After a certain amount of time, their surfaces oxidize and they don't work nearly as well. So a System 80 game will require more maintenance than a more modern game just because of certain design things with the way that the boards interconnect. These Stern games are much more reliable than anything else because there's just one primary board in there. That's it. There's not a lot of interconnects, although there are node boards that are on the playfield on the underside. And as long as those connections are all nice and solid, and they're using, I think, RJ14s, like standard network cables and stuff like that, which have been around forever, and that kind of technology is proven to be pretty reliable. So the more little moving parts and pieces you have, the less reliable the game can be. And this becomes a real problem when it comes to putting a game on location. And over the years, I've learned that I have some games that are really, really awesome, but I just can't put them on location. Twilight Zone is one of them. It's got too many things to go wrong. The clock, the gumball machine, all the magnets, diverters, and underground subway. It's got so many moving pieces that it's just a very complicated, beautiful game, but harder to maintain on location than something like Iron Maiden, which is relatively simple. Probably it only has 3 drop targets. There's very few moving parts. There's a couple of pop bumpers and some slingshots.
No.
Yeah, you're right. And it's just a super simple game with not a lot of complicated parts, and it's proven to be just rock solid. I end up cleaning this game more than I do anything else. It's just really reliable. And if you follow my channel, since I've been operating, and I've been operating a long time, but recently I've been posting videos of problems that I encounter just in case other people want to know, what's wrong with this game or that game. Because usually if it's a design or a QA issue, I'll bring them up. But sometimes you just got a game that just gives you trouble. And sometimes it's just that particular game. It's not necessarily that the game's design is poor. You just have, I hesitate to say a lemon, but you have a game that has ghosts in the machine. For one reason or another, it just is giving you problems. Some cars are like that. You know, you can have a car that's super duper reliable, and you get another car and it just is one problem after another. Now, sometimes those are due to design problems or quality control, where they use some poor quality parts in certain key areas. Stern certainly had that problem with their coil stops for a short period of time, where they were all breaking down, and every game that had those in them, the flippers would start to wear out and go bad. I've got a couple of games that I just have a recurring problems in them that I don't really want to call the games out, because I don't know if it's a design problem as much as it might just be in this particular game. There could be, for example, you know, I don't know. This time I'm going to have to take a closer look. I've got a game that has a kick out hole that just keeps not working. And sometimes it was the wire broken to the coil. Sometimes it was something else. It just keeps malfunctioning. And it might be that the location of this particular, well, I might as well say it, is Deadpool. The scoop in Deadpool just keeps going out on me. And I think it's such an important part of the game. But I will say that the game has run for years and years and years. I don't know why all of a sudden it's given me lots of problems. But I found that I'm just not going to work on it on location. I'm going to bring it back into the workshop, and I'm going to take a good look at it when I got some time. Usually when I'm at the location, you know, it's kind of hit and run. I need to take care of stuff as fast as possible because there's people around, and, you know, people want to play the games and that kind of stuff. So sometimes you have games that just are good games, fun games to play, but they just aren't reliable. And one of the nice things about having, you know, a large collection, if you can see, there's games all over the place here. And the nice thing about having that many games is that I know I can pick a couple of reliable ones. I can go along this row, and I can say personally, I wouldn't put Sorcerer on location. It's just very old, and I worry about it being on all the time. Hot Dog, and I think, is a fairly reliable game. That could probably operate on location. Attack from Mars, once it's bulletproofed, this is a great game for a location game. Jersey Jack's Wizard of Oz, no. I would not put it on location. Too complicated, too many problems. And when things go wrong on this game, it is not easy to fix. I still have issues I'm trying to resolve with this, and I've gotten into arguments with Jersey Jack about simple stuff like just getting a pin to repin a connector and then forcing me to buy an entire cable, which I think is kind of predatory. So I can't even mess with that. Trident, these early Sterns, once you get the bugs out and you have one that doesn't have ghosts in the machine, super reliable. Electromechanical games. Okay, here's where things get a lot more complicated. At this point in time, I just don't even feel comfortable putting any EMs out on location. And the main reason is because they are so old. At this point in time, the leaf switches that handle the rollovers and stuff like that, they can kind of fatigue and start touching each other, and then the game just racks up points and the coils burn. Sometimes you can even start a fire with them. So these just cannot be operated unless you're in a location where people are supervising it, and they know if the game is going ding, 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 over and over and over, they know to shut it down, turn it off. So you'll see various other EMs down this way, and they're better in the location where you say you've got people monitoring everything, and it's like a museum style where you pay one price. But I wouldn't put them on location unattended in a typical arcade. And there's games like, you know, I got Revenge from Mars over there. I love that game, and I think it would do well on location, but I'm worried about the CRT monitor. It's probably going to go out if it has a lot more time on it, and there are ways of upgrading it, but this is all original, so I'm kind of just going to keep it like that. These DMDs, these Stern DMDs, work really, really well. This guy I pulled off location, but I'm going to put him back on location because it's another simple design with not a whole lot going on, and there's very little things to break in it. Godzilla, this one is pretty darn new, but the Pro version I think is really solid. I don't know if I would put a premium on location unattended, I know there's a lot of them out there, though. You have games like these early Williams games, Cyclone. This particular game, one look at it and you can tell it's just quite reliable. It has very little things to go wrong. 3 pop bumpers, one, target, and that's it. It's just very, very simple. A game like Theater Magic, which is right here, I've got some tablecloths on top of it. A lot of stuff that could go wrong. That subway underneath it is an issue, So there's all kinds of different things, but sometimes you get a game that just won't work right. I've seen vehicles where they used poor quality insulation on some of the wiring harness. And then this would cause all kinds of crazy problems years down the line in the car. Electrical things, mechanical things. When the wiring system starts to kind of fail, it just can create one problem after another. I heard there was some line of Fords where they just were using poor quality wiring harnesses and it caused all kinds of problems. I've seen that in some pinball machines where certain types of insulation, just certain colors of insulation of the wiring, would turn to goo. Occasionally I'll see some game and there'll be like weird green glop all over things. Some of the wires melt and some of them don't, just because of whatever chemicals or dye or materials they used in some of the wiring. And that kind of stuff may not appear for years. And these are ghosts in the machine that will, pop up. And there's other ways you can kind of, ultimately you'll never know until you get a game and you really run it through its paces, whether it's got ghosts or it doesn't. But there are signs, like if you have a machine that was heavily, heavily operated, that's always going to be something you're going to be concerned about. Of course, that could also be a good sign that the game is so reliable. Like a lot of those 80s Urabales would have the playfield worn down to the wood. They were so reliable, they almost never changed the balls and never really did much maintenance on the game. If you have a game where you get it from, say, seaside, someplace where there's salt in the air, and you see that all of the mechanisms are lightly corroded, again, you want to pay attention to that because that can cause all kinds of weird problems. And so these ghosts in the machine, you just have to kind of deal with them, I do think in a general sense, game reliability, if there is one characteristic it's most tied to, I would say it is the design of the game, how many mechanisms it's done, and the quality of the build and stuff like that. Earlier games had a lot of MDF. Now these newer Sterns are all using really good quality plywood. So if they get wet or something like that, they're not going to puff up and fall apart like some of the older games, like this Twilight Zone, I think has an MDF bottom on it, and particle board. Whereas these new Sterns have just really good solid plywood. I like that. That can contribute to the long-term reliability of the game as well. So there you have it. Do you have a game with ghosts in the machine? Do you have a game that's just never been able, you couldn't keep it running? It was like whack-a-mole. Share that with me in the comments. Tell me what games you think are the most reliable and which ones you've had the most trouble, and we can kind of chat about it. And until next time, thanks for watching.